Minister, look, we're here to discuss the planned removal of the community and voluntary addiction network groups from the National Oversight Committee on the delivery of the National Drug Strategy. Look, we thought this was going to happen on Friday. Obviously, a number of us had met. You would have received a letter and you would have received, obviously, communications from a number of people in relation to this. And we have seen that there's been a stay of execution. There's talk of further discussion. We require that this would obviously happen. I'm looking, Minister, for real engagement. The fear is here that we go through the motions and then what we had a fear of happening last Friday just happens anyway. You know, we're talking, and the other fear is that obviously you had 6 groups. You had the likes of the Family Addiction Support Network Steering Group, you had Citywide, you had ISCA, you had the Voluntary Addiction Network teams, and then you had 2 extra bodies that change from time to time. And the difficulty is we believe that's going to be removed to 4, that the fear is that then it's the Civil Society Forum, and that the problem with that is the Civil Society Forum is that the department would make a determination in relation to who the personnel that would sit on this. Now, this obviously doesn't fall into anything that relates to accountability and transparency, and that whole idea in relation to the National Drug Strategy of ground-up community representation. It's very similar to what is happening on the Regional Drugs Task Force, whether you're dealing with the department and HSE. Community organisations will tell you that they're dealing with corporatism, they're dealing with basically cutting out of corporatism, bureaucracy, and the cutting out of that community voluntary sector. So this isn't good enough, and we need to make sure that we get commitments today.
Minister, for 25 years our National Drug Strategy has been underpinned by a community development approach. In 1996, the then Minister, on behalf of the state, acknowledged to community leaders who have been campaigning on the drug issue for years, we did not listen, and set up a partnership structure that would include community representation as a right to ensure that this would never happen again. And with the publication of the mid-term review, it appears that the department is attempting to change that partnership and bring it to an end. This mid-term review document, the department is in effect writing the community sector out of the National Drug Strategy. It is altering the definition of community so as to remove the engagement with the wider community and has set out proposals for new structures that will remove the community networks that currently represent their sectors as core constituents of the National Drug Strategy. There is no evidence base for the proposed changes to the structures, and there has not been adequate time or space allowed for the current networks to consider them. Now, I know there has been a break on that process. The National Oversight Committee was supposed to meet on Friday. The Minister has agreed that the Department have further discussions with the community sector. Minister, there's been a very sharp notice by the community sector within the drug strategy that there's something going on here. It's either a political decision, a HSE-driven decision, or civil service decision to try and take the community out of the community, literally. So I'm here to say that I don't support that, and I'm hoping to hear a positive response from you to say that the community will be part of that structure and will be listened to effectively in that structure.
Deputy Ingus has studied.
Margaret, anyway, I don't know which genius thought this one up, because anybody who knows anything about the drugs task forces, the National Drug Strategy, communities and their involvement in drugs, this is the last thing they would dream up. Communities have been central to the partnership, to the framework of trying to tackle the problem that is within their communities. They're the experts in many ways, and it's a pity that sometimes departments or ministers or whomever dreams up these changes to what's working. If it's not broken, don't fix it, especially not in terms of community. And it took a lot of time to win the community trust. I was there kind of in the time of the concerned parents, at the time of COCAD, where there was a huge mistrust by communities of the system as they looked at it, of the Gardaí, of the health boards that it was at the time, ministers and the like, and they bought into it. They saw it as an opportunity in which to frame national policy around an issue which was affecting them directly, as communities, as mothers, fathers, or as people who are addicted to drugs. And they were able to kind of inform that policy rather than a policy dreamed up somewhere else being imposed on them. And I think it is sad that it's come to this, and that there's now a row, if you want, an uncivil row happening. And I don't know where the title civil society forum, usually it's civic, as if uncivil. But kind of, we need to look at kind of what the likes of Fergus McCabe and people like that fought for. It wasn't to be excluded or sidelined, it was to be central to all of the strategy around drugs.
Deputy Mark Ward.
Well, Mark Woods, Lachlan Corla. Minister, there's been a deliberate attempt to erode community resilience right across many departments. So you're not on your own with your own department. We seen it last week about the dismantlement of the local job club, and this week it seems to be around communities and communities involved in the drug strategy. There seems to be a direct threat towards the government from communities and communities' resilience, and any chance that the government have to erode this community resilience, it's grabbed at both hands. I was a former member of the Condalcan Drug and Alcohol Task Force. I've worked on frontline community drug services for many years. Actually, the last one I worked on was in Deputy O'Snuddy's area in Inchicore. And I've seen the value that the community played in our strategic plans, in our strategies, and how the community engaged and informed what was going on in their communities. Because who's best placed to do that outside of our communities? There's been a deliberate attempt to remove the number of community groups on the National Oversight Committee from 6 to 4. And as part of this decision has been made to remove the likes of citywide drugs crisis campaign, the National Family Support Network and ISCA on behalf of the community sector, and the Voluntary Drug Treatment Network on behalf of the voluntary sector from the National Oversight Committee. Minister, we met with Citywide last week as a cross-party group, including members of your own party, and the last question I asked Citywide was what engagement had Citywide had with yourself in this process, and they informed me, and it was public, that they had no engagement with yourself, despite making numerous attempts for that engagement. That didn't happen. Now, I'm being made aware that things have shifted since that meeting that we had last week, and that's to be welcome. But I want to know what the implications is going to be on the likes of Citywide and under voluntary addiction services or community addiction services in relation to funding. Will their funding streams be impeded by this decision?
Minister.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the deputies for raising this very important issue, and I welcome the opportunity to confirm for the House the continued participation of the community and voluntary sector in the National Oversight Committee for the National Drug Strategy. I convened the meeting of the National Oversight Committee on Friday, and indeed, Deputy, my door is always open to meeting various groups, and I've met Citywide on many occasions, and they are part of a lot of the various deputations that have met over the years. It was attended by 3 representatives from the community and voluntary sector, representing Citywide, National Voluntary Drugs and Alcohol Services and ISCA, the Service Users Organisation, and a 4th position remains vacant and will be filled in due course. At the meeting, I provided reassurance that there is no proposal to remove community and voluntary groups from the National Oversight Committee, and this appears to have arisen from a misunderstanding by Citywide of the Department's proposals to establish a civil society on drugs. I also dispute the accuracy of the claim that community groups are being written out of the National Drug Strategy. And let me be clear, reducing harm, supporting recovery, a health-led approach, a response to drugs and alcohol use remains in place as a National Drug Strategy until 2025. As the strategy is a dynamic process, there is flexibility to introduce new actions to address emerging issues in the period 2021 to 2025. To this end, I recently published the mid-term review of the actions in the strategy. And based on the learnings from the mid-term review, 6 strategic priorities for 2021 to 2025 were identified. These priorities strengthen the health-led approach, reflect commitments in the programme of government and align with the EU Drug Strategy and Action Plan 2021 to 2025. I want to assure deputies that the priorities complement and build on the 5 goals in the National Drug Strategy. The interagency approach involving a partnership between statutory, community and voluntary bodies remains central to this strategy, as does strengthening the resilience of communities to respond to the drug problem. One of the strategic priorities is to address the social determinants and consequences for drug use in disadvantaged communities. This priority recognises the additional challenges arising from drug use in disadvantaged communities, including the traveller community. It will address the underlying social and economic determinants that increase the prevalence of problematic drug and alcohol use in certain communities, and will also tackle the criminality and antisocial behaviour associated with the drug trade that imposes a heavy burden on communities. These issues require action across government to promote community development and community safety. The Drug and Alcohol Task Forces and community drug projects also have an important role. Supporting strategic priorities are a number of our horizontal themes. Involvement of service users in the design and delivery of services based on a human rights perspective and the promotion of health literacy. Active and meaningful participation of civil society in the development, implementation and evaluation of policies and services. And also good governance, accountability and mutual respect by all partners. Cross-sectoral funding and the targeting of additional resources. I do believe that the oversight structure to drive the implementation of strategic priorities for 2021 to 2025 will strengthen the partnership approach and give a stronger voice to civil society organisations in developing national policy, including the lived experience of those affected by drug and alcohol addiction.
Minister, look, I think it's fair to say communities have been absolutely failed over the years. This is where we're starting from, and you talk to any organisation that works in the community voluntary sector that deals with drug addiction and the communities that are being ravaged by this, and they will tell you it has become more difficult to deal with the state. I hope what you're saying here is that this is absolute delivery. There will be no diminution in the number of groups who will be sitting on the National Oversight Committee, and that the determination will be made by those groups and not by someone from the department. But here, look, they are very worried at this point in time.
Minister, I take your point that you're saying that the citywide and the community sector has not been taken out of it, that citywide the National Family Support Network and Uisce are going to be included on the National Oversight Committee. Is that what you're saying? Because if you don't name them, if you don't name a group of people to be on that committee, then you don't recognise them. And it's going to be really important that we do have them named. And I hope that from the meeting that's been linked in with the Department of Health, that we will see that positive continuation of partnership.
Margaret, Minister, I welcome your clarification. Hopefully it stands the test of time. Hopefully this was a miscommunication as you presented it. And I know your track record on the drugs issue, and I know you personally mightn't want to go ahead with this, but there has been a tension all along between communities, community groups, and some of those who are in the department and in the HSE. So I would urge you to be cautious of that. Margaret.
It's for you.
No, it was an extra time. It was for your benefit.
Good morning, good. Last count caller. Minister, it's been, you mentioned in your statement that the misunderstanding from citywide. Now, I've worked with frontline organisations, Dixon Centres. They don't make their experiences, they experience with the way these things work, and they don't make misunderstandings or mistakes or anything like that. And they were very unequivocal in what they said. They did ask for a meeting with yourself prior to this, and they said there was no acknowledgement. I didn't say you turned it down, but there was no acknowledgement of you accepting that meeting. So that needs to be a line drawn under that. I do welcome the initiatives that you said that's going to happen, and I really do hope they happen, because we cannot erode any more community services or community resilience anymore.
Minister, to conclude.
To conclude, I want to thank the deputies for the opportunity to confirm the continued participation of community and voluntary organisations in the National Drug Strategy. An interagency approach involving a partnership between statutory, community and voluntary bodies. It remains central to the strategy, as does the strengthening the resilience of communities to respond to the drugs problems, as you have already said. Community organisations will continue to have an active role in the design and delivery of the strategy, both at local level through the Drug and Alcohol Task Forces and at national level through the National Oversight Committee. And I do acknowledge the concerns of one organisation regarding their continued involvement in the National Drug Strategy, and I hear you, Deputy Collins, and I know from the long experience, though, that maybe the key to addressing legitimate concerns isn't through megaphone diplomacy, but through direct communication between parties based on mutual respect. But I will meet those parties again and see can we iron out any difficulties. And again, I look forward to working with all the stakeholders, including community groups, voluntary service providers and people with lived experience of drugs to deliver the strategic priorities for the strategy over its remaining years. And Deputy Ward, you said about a meeting. I'll follow that up in the morning, but my office is open at all times for people to have my number or whatever, want to email. I'm only too delighted to meet and try to maybe resolve this issue. And look, I want to just thank you all for being balanced, and I will try to work this that we'll get a satisfactory outcome that we can all be happy with. But there are issues, and it's a very, very difficult issue, but I hope that we will be able to resolve it in the coming days and weeks. But again, thanks each and every one of you.
Thank you, Deputy.
Well, I think there was a miscommunication and interpretation of exactly what is happening, and I think that was clarified at the meeting last Friday, but I hope in the coming days that we can clarify these even further.
Thank you.